The following episode of the Maui Chamber of Commerce's Business Matters was originally broadcast on May 10th, 2022.
Aloha and good morning, Maui. Happy Tuesday. This is the Maui Chamber of Commerce's Business Matters radio show sponsored by Mokulele Airlines. I'm your host, Pamela Tumpop, president of the Maui Chamber of Commerce. And we're going to have a fun day today. We're going to discuss Senate Bill 2076, the Broadband Bill, and what it means for our state, our local communities, and talk about digital inclusion and the roadmap for our kapuna and digital equity. We're going to speak with a local developer about changes in development over the last decade, discuss critical steps for moving affordable housing and rental development forward, and needed development and infrastructure that's critical to sustain our community. And we're going to meet the executive director of Nahale o Maui and learn about the Community Land Trust. But first, we're going to start with Burt Lum, and Burt is the State of Hawaii Strategy Officer for the Hawaii Broadband Initiative dedicated to digital equity and ensuring that Hawaii establishes a robust, resilient, ubiquitous connectivity to the global broadband network. He was previously the Executive Director of Hawaii Open Data, a nonprofit dedicated to advancing the principles of open data and knowledge in Hawaii, including policy work and community collaborations. He has more than 30 years in Hawaii's technology and communications sector and is a frequent speaker and panelist on the topic of information and communication technology. He's also been a frequent guest to the Business Matters radio show. Aloha, Burt, and good morning.
I like that little Freudian slip there.
Yes. Leave it to me on an early Tuesday morning. Yep. How are you?
For your listeners, they have to really pay attention. So if they missed it, that's too bad.
Now everybody's going to go back when it hits podcast, and they're going to go back and go, "What was that? What was that?" That's good.
This is one for the one for the archive, one for the vault.
That's right. How are you this morning?
Well, it's. I made it through to Monday. It's Tuesday, so it's a brand new day, and happy to join you, Pam.
Oh, so glad to have you on. You have been doing so much work, and one of the things that has been going on this legislative session behind the scenes, many are not aware, of course the Chamber was, and the Broadband Hui was advocating for Senate Bill 2076, the Broadband Hui Bill. Can you share with our audience what this bill means for our state and for our local communities?
Well, there's a need to tell a little bit of the backstory to how this bill evolved. And when the bill was first introduced, it really revolved around the Broadband Digital Equity Office and providing some clarification on the terms like digital equity and broadband equity, and so it also had, which was important, it had an appropriation for the office. And so, as many of your listeners know, in order for a project to really get off the ground, you need some funding and you need some personnel to actually do the work. And for the for the entire time that I've been here, there has really been no funding for broadband. So those are some of the important aspects of 2076. Now, it moved through the Senate and moved without much hesitation. So it moved from Senator Wakai's committee, and then it went to Ways and Means, and then it went over to the House. And when it went over to the House, it kind of evolved to include not only the Broadband Digital Equity Office, but it also included the Broadband Authority. And so the Broadband Infrastructure Authority would have been another government agency that would oversee some of the infrastructure work that was getting built based on the federal programs. And so now it became kind of two entities. And as it went through several committees in the House, there was a lot of discussion on whether or not the Broadband Authority was it was a good time to do that. And given the fact that it takes time to actually not only pass something in legislation, but you have to now staff it. You have to have rules of engagement. You have to have funding. You have to have a lot of stuff to actually get it up and running and functional.
Right.
And so as it went through a couple of committee hearings, I think the conclusion was that it was a little premature for this particular session, and it then sort of evolved into a working group. So the recommendation, if people were to read the current language in the bill, it's really to establish a working group that would consist of the University of Hawaii and the Broadband Digital Equity Office, and it would convene a number of stakeholders, and the main purpose of this working group would be to look at what is the infrastructure that's getting built, what is the projects that are underway, what is the plan to manage this on a going forward basis once the federal programs are well into the implementation stage. So then the working group would make a recommendation to the legislature as to what would be the best sort of government agency that would oversee this in a longer term basis. So addressing issues around sustainability and maintenance. And so that became the working group. and that's what was passed. The important thing to also realize, and this is where I was really trying to make sure that the legislators realized that the original intent of the bill was to try to get an appropriation for the office, and without that language in the bill, there would have been no appropriation. So it would have been back to zero, right?
Right.
So there was a lot of effort on the part of the Broadband Hui and community stakeholders in bringing that to people's attention. And so again, if you were to read the language of the bill, there's $200 million that's going to the University of Hawaii from federal funding. So the main federal pot of money that is already being sort of administered by the U.S. Treasury, and that came out of the American Rescue Plan. That is what the $200 million represents. So that's federal money that is going toward broadband infrastructure. So that is what that particular pot of money is. And then the next appropriation for the office is for $360,000 for fiscal year 2022 to 23, and 3 FTE. So it at least gives us a starting place to build some capacity,
right.
to manage some of these projects, especially in the area of digital equity.
You've been doing this for a while, and during session, we've been so busy during session at the Chamber ringing in on bills that I haven't gotten to participate the way I was starting to in the beginning, and I will get back to on the Broadband Hui. But can you tell people for a minute, too, because this is really important. As you talk about, this federal funding is coming in, we're now getting projects off the ground, we're really excited. I know you're going to talk about some of the planning in a minute, but what's been built? How many people currently serve? You've been building a broad coalition. How many people are currently serving on the Broadband Hui? And tell everybody how long that's been going on without funding, with volunteer service, serving on a broadband committee.
Well, so the Broadband Hui started in March of 2020, which was basically the first week of when Governor Ige had the stay-at-home order. So if people recall, when that order came out, everybody was, required, I guess, mandated to stay at home. Businesses kind of shuttered and schools shuttered, and everybody needed to do whatever they needed to do from home. So whether it's, education or healthcare or working or even accessing government services, you had to do it from home. And then the recognition or realization was that, if people didn't have an internet access at home, then they were pretty much isolated. And so we started the Broadband Hui back, in March of 2020, just to bring community stakeholders together to find out what are the resources that are becoming available. So at the first meeting, it was really kind of revolved around the fact that students had to stay at home, and the major ISPs like Spectrum and Hawaiian Telecom were offering, I think it was like a 90-day free service, that people could use. So we wanted to bring the parties together and let them know that this is now become available, and that you should take advantage. So we had a lot of education. We had higher ed in there. We had charter schools and private schools. So, but it was maybe about 15 to 20 people, and I remember our first meeting. Senate President joined us, and that was a nice representation from the legislature, and I committed to having the meeting every week. So we thought, we'll this is such a dynamic and such a urgent need that we'll meet every week, and we'll figure out what's going on. And over the course of, and tomorrow will be the 100 and, I'm losing count, 111 consecutive week of meetings. Now, a lot has happened over the course of 111 weeks, and we wanted to follow what was the trajectory for, activity, whether it's state activity, private sector activity, whether it's federal activity. What's happening across the nation that would help alleviate the problem that we're encountering. And I think what really we started to see, and if you recall, at the end of 2020, there was the CARES Act, and there was a recognition that there needed to be some money injected into the community, into the economy to get things, get it rolling. It just cannot just sit and stagnate without any money. It'll be disaster. So remember the CARES Act, and right after the CARES Act, at the end of President Trump's term, there was another act called the Consolidated Appropriations Act, and in these acts, it's very important because it's the first time that broadband was actually a line item in the act, and it was a line item that had money associated with it. So you had the Consolidated Appropriations Act, which came out at the beginning of 2021, and then you had right after that the American Rescue Plan. And so the Broadband Hui, which has grown to about 450 people, and on a weekly basis, we'll get anywhere from 60 to 70 people, and it's a good cross section of representation from across Hawaii. It's a lot of nonprofits, a lot of education, a lot of telehealth and healthcare, a lot of private sector. We have all the the carriers on, from Hawaiian Tel to Spectrum to Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, and businesses. And Pam, you're a member of that, as well as folks like EDA, which is the Economic Development Alliance of Hawaii, and another nonprofit that's been kind of an anchor for our convening is Transform Hawaii Gov. So a lot of the people that have been there from the beginning are there 111 weeks into this. Yes. And I think everybody recognizes that this is unprecedented. It's not only a recognition that we need to do something, but the federal government has risen to the challenge of funding some of these projects. So how does Hawaii best position itself to make the best use of that money. And what I tell people is that you really got to come into this effort with your let's say privileges put on the side, right? Because if you come at it with let's say from a perspective of privilege, and you think, I got internet access, I don't know why do these guys need to get so urgent about it? Well, if you look at communities that are remote or disenfranchised or forgotten, think of let's say living in a remote area of Hawaii Island and not being able to access the services that I just mentioned. Are we prejudicing ourselves for people who choose to live remotely? And so those privileges, coming from a place of privilege, you have to kind of put that on the side and say, okay, so how do we raise the tide for everybody? How do we get everybody to a point of digital equity, and we sort of when we first started, we harkened back to what happened in 1824. Kamehameha III pronounced that he wanted to make Hawaii a nation of literacy. And in 1824, I think there was something like 94% of Native Hawaiians were literate. I mean, that's huge. That's huge. And so how do we achieve that same goal in 2024 or 2025? Can we create a community that's 99% digital literate, and not only literate but has access to devices, has access to the internet, we now have the ability to achieve what we refer to as digital equity. And can we do that, in 200 years later? And can we truly pivot Hawaii into a digital economy? And not only do it for the privileged, and do it, are we able to do it for everybody in the state? And so we've actually had some small wins, which involve places like Puhonua Waianae and Puhonua Waimanalo, and these are communities that were previously homeless. They've established themselves in a community, kind of like a kauhale, and they don't typically get the kind of internet service from Hawaiian Television Spectrum, because they don't have the typical home and street and address that you can run a connection to. So can we help create a what I call a community network, which basically gets a broadband connection to the land parcel, the community, and then can we distribute via wireless Wi-Fi through the community? And that's what we did up at Puhonua Waimanalo. And this is even pre-pandemic. This is like back in November of 2019. And we proved that could be a model for connecting communities that were typically forgotten, disenfranchised, forgotten, and never thought of again, right? So we picked the challenging ones and see if we can do it. And lo and behold, I mean, through the support of Internet Society and other nonprofit and philanthropic support, we were able to do it without any federal money or without any state money. So it can be done, but it takes the community to do this. It takes people on the ground at a grassroots level, working together to achieve that goal. And so that what I like to kind of impart on your listeners is that it's not just the boatloads of federal money coming into the community. It's like you got to have the community working at the grassroots level to make sure that the wraparound services are there, the continuity, the management on a going forward basis, the sustainability. All that stuff is not going to happen regardless of how much money you pour into it. It's got to be believed in by the people on the ground, working in the community. So that's kind of what we're doing, and that's the whole purpose and function of the Broadband Digital Equity Office, is to make sure that from a government standpoint, we have the the momentum and the support and the collaboration across the entire community to achieve a goal that would benefit all of Hawaii and not just the privileged.
I think, Burt, you have really helped create something astounding, and it really is such an amazing project that, to establish the Digital Equity Office, to unite all these people together, and to make sure that we really are achieving digital equity and bringing everybody into this circle and including everybody. It's a tremendous effort. I wish we had more time. I know we have other questions and things we want to talk about, but thank you so much for joining us this morning and reminding everybody, about how important this tremendous work is. We'll bring you back on, and next time we'll kind of talk about other ways people can get involved. But keep doing the great things. We're glad that we got funding because, as you said, this has all been volunteer effort. You've united hundreds of people to serve on this committee, about 400, and great things are happening on the grassroots level. And now with some staffing and some additional, funding to get some of the infrastructure in place that we've been talking about for quite some time, great things are coming. So thank you, Burt, for your tremendous leadership, and it's always great to have you on the show.
Well, thanks, Pam. I appreciate, having you invite me on and giving your listeners the progress that we're making, and and again, we're focused on our rural community. So, I love Maui.
We love it. We love having you here too. So come on back.
I will.
All right, Burt. Have a great day.
Okay. Mahalo. Thanks.
Mahalo. All right, we'll be right back after a brief message from Mokulele Airlines.
Mokulele Airlines operates the largest commuter airline hub in the country, right here in Kahului. Fly Mokulele from Kahului to Molokai, Lanai, Hana, Waimea, Kona, and now Hilo. Mokulele also operates the only flights between Kapalua and Honolulu. There is never a middle seat on Mokulele, and every seat has a window and aisle. Visit mokuleleairlines.com and take your next flight from the newly renovated Mokulele Terminal.
Welcome back to the Maui Chamber of Commerce's Business Matters radio show. I'd like to now welcome Everett Dowling, president of Dowling Company, Inc. Everett has been active in real estate development business for over 25 years. He is the president of Dowling Company, Inc., a Maui-based real estate development company. Everett has served on the board of trustees of Babson College from 1994 to 2008, on the board of regents of the University of Hawaii from 1998 to 2003. He is a member of the Urban Land Institute's Resort Development Red Flight Council, the Maui Contractors Association, and the Japan-Hawaii Economic Council. He also serves on the Hawaiian Telecom Advisory Board and the board of the Institute for International Urban Development. He earned his BA in economics from Randolph-Macon College and an MBA in entrepreneurship from Babson College. Aloha, Everett. Good morning. How are you this morning?
And good morning, Pam. Nice to hear your voice and to be on the show.
Oh,
thanks for all you and your team do for our community and the small businesses here on Maui.
Oh, thank you so much. Great to hear your voice too. With all this stay at home and work at home, we don't get to get out and connect with each other as much as we'd like to.
Well, hopefully that's coming to an end.
Hallelujah! Yes, I've been suddenly. It's like the curtain has been removed, and all of a sudden we're out and about again, which I'm thrilled with.
It was a long shutdown.
It was. Oh, it's so good to be back. Everett, you've been involved in development for so many years, and one of the things that I always cherish is your perspective. And I was just wondering if you could share with us, how have you seen development change over the last several decades in Maui?
Yeah, I came to Maui in 88, and at that point the emphasis was kind of upward mobility. It was trying to provide housing opportunities to the whole spectrum. People in need of affordable housing, and people who had started out maybe on affordable housing or saving money, living with their parents or other relatives, and were going for more market rate housing.
Mm-hmm.
And there was also an emphasis on job creation and the resort development. So you had the whole spectrum of housing was getting attention. And there were a lot of planning. You had the community plans and the general plans, and you go through a very long process of discussions of different parcels and different properties. And once a property was zoned, then it was to at the time it was okay. Let's get to work and build housing.
Right.
Over time, that process has become much slower. It's never really final until you get your building permit, because there's been a number of additional layers and different boards and commissions and approvals required that undermine the integrity of the zoning. Before the community would have a lot of opportunities to provide their views and input. Once the property was owned, then it was owned, and the planning department and the county public works department, everyone was kind of behind that plan, and let's get the homes built.
Right.
In addition, the current county council and to a certain extent the one before it have really placed all of the attention on affordable housing, mm-hmm. which we need. Our community, about 50% of the housing demand is for affordable housing,
right?
And it's for a segment of the population that cannot afford market rate housing. So the attention has been 201Hs. Let's build 100% affordable projects, which our community definitely needs. But that leaves out the demand for the other 50% that need market rate housing or even vacation luxury housing.
Right.
And we need that whole spectrum, because the system doesn't work just building affordable housing. There are 50% of the population of Maui they don't qualify for affordable housing. They make too much money, and they don't qualify for affordable housing. And I think that's what we've seen in the marketplace for the housing market here, and that's why our average price of a house is now $1.2 million.
Right.
And a negative consequence of that is it's pushing the middle class out of Maui. There are increasingly more opportunities for affordable housing buyers, but the middle class gets squeezed out, and that's a big concern. I mean, those are the families, the individuals who were born and raised on Maui. They go off to college. They come back or they try to come back, and they can't afford to live on Maui.
Yeah.
I've got my son and daughter went to St. Anthony's, and they've got a couple of classmates there, and they both went off to the mainland, paid their way through college. They're civil engineers. They want to come home, and they can't afford to come home. And they're high-paying jobs. They're civil engineers, and we need engineers on Maui.
We do.
But it's yes, we need the whole spectrum. Someone described it as you've got three individuals walking into a restaurant, and one individual wants a steak, and the other individual wants a pork chop, and the last wants a hamburger. So they walk into the restaurant, and the individual who wanted the steak and they can afford to buy the steak, he's told, well, we don't have any steak. And he goes, well, okay, I'll buy the pork chop. Oh, we don't have any pork chop either. Well, I'll take the hamburger. And then the pork chop buyer, which is kind of the middle class buyer, there's no pork chop. He buys the hamburger. Well, now there's no hamburger left. Right. So I see that happening here. We have if we don't approve the luxury projects, the people who would like to buy in a Nahale or Kapalua, they end up buying in Maui Metals or Kihei, and the people who want it to be in those areas, they end up going to the areas that were really planned and designed and constructed for our local population. The
right.
Pukalanis, the Maui Lanis, the Kealanis, we need all spectrum of housing. We need to build it across the board, not just affordable housing. And our politicians aren't doing that. Our politicians are only approving, and they're patting themselves on the back for it, they're only approving affordable housing. Gosh, we sure need that, but we need the whole spectrum. So I think that's the biggest difference over the last 3 decades.
I think that is a phenomenal overview, and I really appreciate what you're saying as well. I love the story about the steak and the pork chop and the hamburger, because today we're seeing, I live in Pukalani, and that's exactly what we're seeing. We're seeing a lot of people who, would otherwise go into those high-end resort areas now moving into Pukalani, which was always, a place where a lot of local, Pukalani, Makawao, these areas up country, that's where I live, so I'll speak to that. But we're seeing the housing prices shoot up there astronomically because some of those other places, they're not seeing availability where they would otherwise buy. So that's a really important thing to note. What do you see, Everett, as critical steps for truly moving affordable housing and rental development forward, which you point out we desperately need it? What do you see as the critical steps to help us get there?
I think I think we're doing a good job, actually, of building affordable housing. I think that you look at all of the projects on the west side in Kihei, in Central. Unfortunately, not too many up country just because of the water situation. But I think we're doing a good job building affordable housing. I think it's the other segments that we really need to step up our game, and I think we need to start respecting the effort and the expense taxpayers have paid to have properties rezoned, go through the many hearings. In some cases, it can be as many as a couple of dozen hearings on projects. And you look at the expense that's incurred, and then projects get held up. Walea 670 is a great example. That's 1,250 units. It was approved 13 years ago. And it's still being held up by Maui tomorrow and groups that similar to Maui tomorrow, and it's just that's a community that was designed for the local market. Mm-hmm. That's 1,250 units, market and affordable units that aren't here. And we looked at Kailani recently. Where are the property tax bills mailed? 11% of the property tax statements are mailed to mainland addresses. Mm. And that project was not designed for people from the mainland. It was designed for, the local, as Elmer Carvalho used to talk about, you wanted to have a ladder of housing. And Kailani was it was designed for the move-up buyer. Right. And 11% of those homes are now owned by people from the mainland. Do they want to live there? I don't know. Maybe they do, but my guess is they would prefer to live in the retirees, and they would prefer to live in a resort area where the infrastructure is designed for that type of resident. And we also have the whole short-term rental aspect. Now there are over 6,000 short-term rentals on Maui, and that's a huge inventory of housing opportunities that. I think it's more appropriate to have full-time residents living in subdivisions as opposed to part-time vacation residents.
Right. And that was part of the beauty of the early planning, right? Is to put people in that were here to be on vacation and here short-term, to put them into those planned resort areas.
Right, where the infrastructure is designed for them.
Exactly. Yeah.
And there's adequate parking. You don't have the crowding, the overcrowding of our local communities, and you don't have the strangers in our local communities. It's something very satisfying and comforting about knowing who your neighbors are and knowing that you're not going to have a new neighbor in that unit every week.
Right. Yeah. It's. There was some interest in this, but it just grew very rapidly. And going back to the history and the planning and understanding that, I feel like over time there's been a sort of a loss of education and reminding people why some of these planning steps were so important early on. and how they benefited us. And going back to you mentioning Elmer and the housing ladder and why that was so important. And had we stuck to that, talking about Kealani, if we had those other opportunities, would we have seen what we're seeing now? Everett, do you have upcoming projects? What are you working on now, and what other things are
we've
needed?
Got probably another 2 or 3 years work left in the Kealani project, mostly commercial at this point. I think we have about 160 more market rate houses that D.R. Horton will be building in that project. And then Linda Schatz and her group are doing 324 rental units across the street from Foodland and Long's Drugs. We're doing about 161 units for Department of Hawaiian Homelands, kind of catty corner to Foodland, Malco over the road. This is all in Wailuku. And then about 50 units of vacation homes in McKenna.
Okay.
So we're trying to hit the whole spectrum, but it's difficult. It just takes a very long time to go through the process. And as soon as you think you've checked all the boxes, and then something new pops up. But it's important. If we're going to maintain our community, and if we're going to be able to keep our children and grandchildren here on Maui, we got to build more housing. That's the only way they're going to come home.
It's so true. I mean, my daughter went off to college, and then she's now living in Kansas City, Missouri, where you can buy on a 9,000 square foot lot a completely remodeled, very fashionable 4-bedroom, 2-bath house for a whopping $170,000.
Incredible.
So how do you? And she wants to come home. She'd love to come back to Maui. She loves her job there as well, but it's really a challenge when you're on the mainland and you're making good money there. And for many of the careers we have here, she's in education, gets paid better there, and the cost of living is so much lower there.
Yep. Well, real estate can address the cost of living when it comes to housing.
Yeah.
And that's a huge chunk. Housing expenses is a huge chunk of people's budgets, and we just have to keep pushing and hoping that the politicians will start approving projects, projects of all types, and embracing projects of all types in the appropriate locations, so that there are housing opportunities available for everybody.
It's so true. And it's one of the things that we mention all the time, especially this legislative session too. We always talk about our high cost of living and what it takes for people to live here. And we keep reminding our legislators, then do something on housing, because housing is the top cost when it comes to our high cost of when we talk about a living wage and what it costs to live here, we have to look at housing, and we have to bring that down, because you can't raise the minimum wage enough to make up for that differential.
We have a tendency to over-plan on Maui. We over-plan and under-execute.
Yeah.
Back, I was reading an article a few weeks ago, 1974. How many planners do you think were in the planning department?
I have no idea.
14.
Oh, wow.
14. We had a population of about 50,000, and there were 14 planners. So our population now is about 3 times that, a little bit more than 3 times that.
Yeah.
But we have about 7 times more planners.
Oh.
It's just we do a really good job of planning, but we do a horrible job of executing.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And you brought something else up that I think is really important. And I hear it all the time, because people will say, and you also mentioned earlier on Wailea 670, people say, well, these units were promised to us and they never happened. But as people go through the process and they think they've got all these assurances, at the end of the game, as they're going for the building permits, there's all these new conditions imposed. And people are asked...
The rules keep changing.
Yeah, the rules change, and then they're asked on the spot in their final hearings to do all these extra things. They're not sitting at their desk being able to go on the computer and pencil it out and refer to the budget and go back and forth and see how this all works. And their costs are going up, moment by moment in these final hours. And so as they're working to get the developments through, they're trying to commit to things, and then they go back later on and they look at these numbers and go, it just doesn't work. Right? We're not giving people time to even really examine what can work. And I've been in a few hearings recently where they'll ask a developer, well, how much more can you do? And Howie Kihuni said the other day, I can't even give you an estimate. I mean, prices are changing every day with costs of supplies going up and lumber. And, these are things that you just don't discuss on the fly. These are things that people have to go back to and really look at and pencil out and see what can and can't be done, but why are we always doing it at the 11th hour?
Yeah, that's a good question.
And
I wish I had the answer. I don't. But it's a good question. I mean, we builders and developers, that's what we like to do. We like to build and develop. We like to, we like to create housing, and we like to create housing of the whole spectrum. Right. Because we live in the community, and we recognize that there are needs at every single level. But it's hard right now. It's just very difficult because you got a county council that just wants affordable housing. And that's great for the 50% of the demand, but it leaves out the other 50%.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you being on, Everett. I appreciate you helping us see, taking us back as well as where we're at today and giving us suggestions for how we can move forward. And we're going to talk to Cassandra next of Nahale, Maui. So we're going to talk about some of that, back to the 50%. But it's important to remember we really need the spectrum.
Well, Cassandra does a wonderful job, and she's got an exciting project coming up, and I think you'll find what she's doing very interesting. We're lucky. Maui's lucky to have her.
We are. Yeah, we're a supporter of what they're doing as well. She is amazing. So we'll be talking about that next. But thank you, Everett, so much for giving us an update on what you've got going on and, ways that we can look to improve as we try to build that balance in our housing availability and making sure that we're addressing every end of the spectrum.
And thanks, Pam.
Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Same to you.
Thank you. Aloha. All right, folks, if you're just tuning in, it is my pleasure to welcome Cassandra Abdul, the Executive Director of Nahale o Maui. Good morning, Cassandra. How are you?
Good morning. Very early in the morning. Wonderful. Thank you so much for the invitation to join you on your program.
My pleasure. I know it's a little early. I'm usually up early because I drive down from Pukalani to get to the station, but haven't had my coffee yet, but will right after the show. And really excited about all that you're doing in our community. Can you tell everybody a little bit about Nahale o Maui, which is a community land trust, and help people understand how this works?
Okay. Nahale o Maui is a community land trust, and there are more than 200 to 250 across the U.S., in Canada, and in Asia. So it's a really well-documented, tried-and-true program. And what it really does is it's the step between market-rate homes and being a renter. So yes. We are a step in between, so we help you bridge that gap. So, and we're not the only ones. Habitat also does that, and we each focus on a particular area median income group. So for Nahale o Maui, it's from 80 to 140% of the area median income. What we can do is we work with the county quite a bit. We've partnered with them on a number of homes, and they help us with securing the land. And then we are in a position to then find a contractor to help us build homes for our families. Because we sell leasehold, the price of the homes is significantly reduced from what the market rate is.
Right.
For instance, we just received a house back from the county in Lahaina with a fee simple appraisal of $1,020,000.
Mm-hmm.
The leasehold appraisal was very close to that, and the house was sold for under $500,000.
Wow.
So this makes it affordable. It was purchased by a school teacher and his family. So, and it will stay affordable forever. This was a house that had a 10-year deed restriction if the homeowner wanted to sell it, they would have to offer it back to the county first. So the county did buy it back. Nahale, Maui was fortunate enough to receive that from the county, and now it will stay affordable in perpetuity. It will never go to market rate.
Which is so exciting. I mean, this is one of the ways that, again, we can keep these houses on Maui and make them affordable for generations, folks. Now we're talking generational opportunities with our housing. So that you've got a lot of things going on, but I also want to talk a little bit about, everybody's talking about affordable housing, and some people really don't know, and the dynamics are changing because everybody keeps hearing about median home prices, and we're hearing, how we're well over $1 million now. But can you talk a little bit about your most recent affordable housing project that you've been involved in, and what were the affordable ranges in there?
Okay, well, we did the Kahoma homes. That was a development of West Maui land. Habitat got 10 lots, and Nahale o Maui got 12 lots. And we were able to design our homes. They were custom homes, very nicely finished, and we sold them. There were 3 designs. They were 3-bedroom and 4-bedroom homes.
Wow.
And they were sold between I believe $390,000 to $460,000 for the most expensive, largest 4-bedroom, 2.5-bath home.
That is awesome at this time to get a brand new home of that size. That's tremendous.
In West Maui.
And good point. And in West Maui.
Yes, yeah. And we have a great one coming up. So we just recently are in the process of receiving 17 house lots from the county of Maui in central Maui, in Maui Lani. And Maui Health Foundation will be receiving 16 lots there. So together, we are going to be able to develop central Maui housing for our families. And we're very excited to be able to move forward with this, although it's going to be some time before we're through the project and able to sell.
Yeah, but we too, the Maui Chamber of Commerce was very excited to see those opportunities, both for Nahale o Maui and our hospital as well, because again, that's also you folks are also really working on a great gap group, and the work that you do is tremendous. And to have the county use those house lots in a way where we're going to be able to keep them affordable long term, that's so important. And I just really appreciate all the work that you did, because there was a lot of legislation even just to kind of get the land to move forward with the bills and have the land be able to be turned over to Nahale o Maui. And now the planning, there's planning already, but now the work begins to really, how long does it take to move from now that you're getting the land to plan and build? What's the time frame generally?
Well, that's a very interesting question, and a couple of years ago I would have a different answer for you.
Yes.
Today, with the supply chain issues that we're looking at, it's really questionable. I'm thinking that we're probably a couple of years out before the houses are finished, and we're able to sell to island families.
Yeah.
I went to look at a new house just recently that was built out in Kihei, with a package from Hansador, and they're a month behind because Hansador, who's a material house, cannot supply the material for their own packages.
I've been hearing that as well. I remember I'll be trying to look and build something shortly, but I remember somebody saying about 8 months ago, get a Hansador package quick. Lock in the lumber price. Get as much as you can now, because, we had supply chain issues over a year ago. And, of course, as we've seen, it's getting tougher and tougher. So one of the other things that I'm really excited that you do as well is you're helping people prepare to just get ready to start looking at buying a home. So you have a home buyer education class that you offer. Can you tell people about that class, and also where they're located and how can they find you?
Okay, that's a great question. Sometimes, we've been told we're the best kept secret, which is not what we want to be. But yes, we have home buyer orientation classes at least once every quarter, depending on demand. And it's one of the 4 steps to become a qualified buyer for our program. Excuse me. So we're doing it by Zoom now and have been doing it for the last 2 years. I'm not sure when we're going to go back to in-person classes on that, but I firmly believe that there are no good surprises in real estate. So we want to make sure that the people that come to us truly understand what our program is about.
Right.
It is leasehold, and we take, the first class about an hour or so on a Saturday morning and talk to them about our program. The second step is to take an 8-hour HUD-approved class. It's a great thing to take even if you don't buy a house right away because it helps with financial literacy.
Mm-hmm.
They can help you repair or improve your credit scores and your credit. And you can also learn about home ownership. Then the third step is to get a pre-qualification letter from the lender of your choice. And then when you finish all 3 of those, the fourth step is to come in and meet with staff, and we go over the ground lease in detail. So, again, no surprises.
That's awesome. And we've got about 30 seconds. So, Cassandra, tell us how everybody can find you.
Our website, www.nahaleomaui.org.
Awesome. Cassandra, thank you so much for joining us on the show today and for sharing all the great programs and the things that you're doing with Nahale o Maui and how we can get people into affordable housing. We appreciate having you on today.
Thank you, Pam. We really appreciate what you're doing, getting the information out. Thank you very much for all you do.
Oh, bless you. It's my pleasure. Thanks so much.
Aloha.
Aloha. Well, folks, it's always a fun day on Tuesday mornings. I hope you enjoyed today's show. That's all the time we have for Business Matters, sponsored by Mokulele Airlines. I'm Pamela Tumpop, president of the Maui Chamber of Commerce, wishing you blessings and best wishes for a beautiful Maui day.